You walk past them every day, the tarp pulled tight against a highway overpass, the cardboard folded with almost architectural precision beneath a bridge, the layered plastic sheeting angled just so against a concrete wall. You've seen it 100 times and never once stopped to ask, how is that still standing after 3 days of rain? Here's what nobody tells you. The people building those shelters are applying the same thermal physics that keeps your house warm, working with materials your city throws away, solving problems that billion-dollar housing agencies have failed to solve for decades. In 2024, a record 771,480 Americans were counted homeless in a single night. Over 278,000 of them slept outside, the number that should stop you cold. They die roughly 20 years younger than you do. Not because they don't know how to survive, but because the system was never designed for them to. Picture a January night in Portland, Oregon, 2001. The temperature has dropped into the low 30s. 8 people have set up 5 tents beside the Broadway Bridge on a strip of pavement nobody else wanted. What they have is cardboard, thick, corrugated, double-walled appliance boxes laid flat across the frozen concrete in careful overlapping layers, like roofing shingles facing downward instead of up. They have blue polyethylene tarps, the cheapest kind from the hardware store, angled against the concrete bridge abutment at exactly the pitch that sends rainwater sheeting away from their sleeping area rather than pooling beneath it. They have plastic sheeting salvaged from a construction dumpster, tucked inside the tarp layer as a second vapor barrier, and they are warmer than they have any right to be. These 8 people, homeless activists who had just won a landmark court ruling declaring Portland's camping ban cruel and unusual punishment, were not making do. They were engineering. They were applying without formal training and without a single dollar of institutional support the same fundamental physics principles behind the igloo, the Anderson shelter, and the sod house: trap dead air, block moisture, break ground contact, angle the roof. That community became Dignity Village. It still exists today, 25 years later, housing 60 people in 43 individual cottages, self-governed as a nonprofit, powering itself and 100 neighboring homes with solar panels. It began with cardboard on frozen concrete and the knowledge of how to use it. So what exactly did they know? And why does the billion-dollar housing industry keep pretending it amounts to nothing? Before we go any further, have you ever walked past one of these shelters and genuinely wondered how it works? Or did you assume it was chaos and keep moving? Drop your honest answer in the comments below, because what you are about to discover will completely change how you see the material world around you. Here is where it gets uncomfortable. Walk into any emergency homeless shelter in America right now, and you will find a system designed around compliance, not survival. Curfews at 9 or 10 at night that require you to abandon your possessions on the street while you sleep inside. Mandatory exit by 6 or 7 in the morning. Back outside before the temperature has even begun to rise. Dormitory layouts with 80 or 100 beds in one open room. No privacy, no security for anything you own. Strict sobriety requirements that immediately disqualify anyone dealing with addiction, which is to say a significant portion of the chronically homeless population, and a capacity gap so severe the system cannot begin to absorb the actual need. In 2024, approximately 510,000 shelter beds existed for 771,480 homeless people. California, the state spending more per capita on homelessness than anywhere in the developed world, has 39 shelter beds for every 100 homeless individuals, not enough for half. Homeless survey of 200 unsheltered New Yorkers found that 75% had previously used the shelter system and left voluntarily. 38% cited safety as their primary reason for leaving. Theft, violence, bed bugs, the constant hypervigilance of sleeping in a room full of strangers where any confrontation can escalate without warning. These are not complaints from people being picky. These are reports from people making clear-eyed, rational risk calculations and concluding that a well-built shelter under a bridge is genuinely safer than a cot in a city-run dormitory. and they are frequently correct. When San Francisco opened its navigation centers, low-barrier facilities that allowed partners, pets, and personal possessions with round-the-clock access and no mandatory sobriety requirement, people voluntarily dismantled their encampments and lined up for referrals for the first time in the city's history. The lesson was sitting in plain sight the entire time. The barrier was never desire. It was the system. Here is the part that should make you angry. The system did not fail by accident. It was built around a philosophy that treats homelessness as a behavioral problem requiring correction rather than a housing problem requiring housing. The rules, the curfews, the sobriety mandates, the mandatory morning exits, the ID requirements are not there to protect the residents. They are there to manage a population. And they were designed by people who have never spent a single night in 30-degree weather with everything they own stuffed into 2 trash bags. The failure is institutional, not individual. If you have ever spent a night in an emergency shelter and felt unsafe, you were not being weak or ungrateful. You were reading the room correctly. The system failed you. It was designed to fail you. Now let's talk about what actually works. And this is where the science becomes genuinely remarkable. The first thing every experienced builder gets right, and it is the decision that separates people who survive cold nights from people who do not, is the ground. Most people think about rain when they picture a shelter. They should be thinking about the floor. Medical science has long understood that the human body loses heat through 5 primary mechanisms, but the one that kills fastest in outdoor conditions is conduction, direct physical contact with cold surfaces. Lying on frozen concrete or cold ground transfers heat out of your body at a rate that sleeping in open air at the same temperature simply cannot match. Cold ground behaves like a heat sink, drawing warmth out of your core continuously, faster than your metabolism can replace it. This is why every experienced wilderness survival instructor teaches the same first rule without exception. Insulate yourself from the ground before you think about insulating yourself from the air above you. And this is precisely why experienced homeless builders consistently lay down cardboard before anything else. Not because cardboard is all they have, because cardboard is genuinely scientifically effective. Research from Brno University of Technology and Caltech's Department of Energy Technology measured corrugated cardboard's thermal conductivity at 0.045 to 0.055 watts per meter Kelvin, nearly identical to commercial fiberglass insulation, which measures 0.040 to 0.052 in the same units. Here is the analogy that makes this undeniable. Cellulose insulation, the blown-in material inside millions of American attics sold at premium prices in every home improvement store, is literally shredded recycled cardboard and newspaper, treated with fire retardants and repackaged. The raw material is identical. The trapped air physics is identical. A 4-inch stack of layered corrugated cardboard delivers approximately R6 to R8 of thermal resistance. Even 2 or 3 layers of flattened appliance boxes provide AR 2.5 to R5. Comparable to a quality foam camping pad retailing for $60. The fatal weakness is moisture. Wet cardboard collapses instantly as an insulator because water conducts heat 25 times faster than air, destroying the trapped pockets that do all the thermal work. Every experienced builder knows this instinctively. The cardboard always goes inside the plastic, always. The plastic is not decorating the shelter. The plastic is protecting the engine of the shelter. Here is where it gets more interesting because the next problem is one most people never even think about. It is invisible, it builds up overnight while you sleep, and if you get the sequence wrong, it destroys your insulation from the inside out. A single person breathing and perspiring in an enclosed shelter exhales between 200 and 300 milliliters of water vapor every single night. That warm, humid air rises, contacts the cold outer walls of the shelter, and condenses, becoming liquid water that soaks directly into whatever insulation it touches. Wet insulation loses more than 50% of its R value. Polyethylene sheeting, the blue tarp, the contractor trash bag, the plastic drop cloth pulled from a construction dumpster, functions as a Class 1 vapor barrier with a water vapor permeance of just 0.05 to 0.10 perms, meaning water molecules practically cannot penetrate the polymer structure at all. And because air movement accounts for 98% of all moisture transport inside enclosed spaces, a barrier that stops air movement stops moisture movement entirely. A properly configured tarp shelter is not merely keeping rain out. It is actively managing the invisible thermal chemistry of the air inside. That is not improvisation. That is building science. If you are finding this valuable, if this is genuinely changing how you see the materials sitting in the dumpster behind your nearest shopping center, hit like. This channel exists to show you exactly what the billion-dollar industry quietly left out of the conversation. Homeless builders who layer Mylar emergency blankets inside their shelters are not repurposing discarded medical supplies. They are correctly applying aerospace thermal engineering with a material that costs under $2. The limitation is that Mylar provides essentially zero protection against conducted heat loss. It reflects radiation, but cannot trap dead air the way cardboard or foam does. The solution, discovered independently by cold weather campers, military survival trainers, and homeless builders alike, is to pair the Mylar with an air gap, keeping the reflective surface an inch or two away from the body, so reflected heat cannot immediately conduct back out through direct contact. One material stops conduction, one material stops radiation, one material stops convection and moisture. Each targets a different physics mechanism. The system is integrated and deliberate. It is not random, it is engineering. And then there is the roof, which is where you can see the geometry of survival thinking most clearly. Water finds weakness. It finds it unerringly and exploits it without pause. A flat surface collects rain and channels it toward the lowest point, typically the seam, the overlap, the imperfect join between two materials. A pitched surface angled at 30 to 60 degrees sends water downhill continuously, recruiting gravity as a permanent waterproofing agent that requires zero maintenance and never fails. Journalist Matthew O'Brien spent nearly 5 years exploring the drainage tunnels beneath the Las Vegas Strip, documenting communities of 1,200 to 1,500 people living across 600 miles of underground infrastructure originally built in the 1990s to protect the city from flash flooding. What he found inside were not crude makeshift spaces. He found interior rooms furnished with bookshelves and beds, improvised showers, plywood, and scrap metal shelters built with evident care and accumulated knowledge. The tunnels themselves, engineering structures designed specifically to redirect water away from the city, had been recognized by their inhabitants as the ultimate pre-built waterproofing system. They did not build around the water problem. They moved inside the city's own solution to it. A human body at rest generates approximately 100 watts of heat continuously, the thermal equivalent of a bright, incandescent bulb running without pause inside an enclosed space. In a shelter the size of a refrigerator box, 100 watts of metabolic output is genuinely meaningful heating. In a space the size of a school gymnasium, it disappears without a trace. Small shelters are warm shelters. This is not preference. This is thermodynamics. The Mad Housers, a nonprofit founded in Atlanta in 1987 by Georgia Tech architecture students, have understood this for nearly 40 years. Their standard hut measures 6 feet by 8 feet by 10 feet, not because they lack materials, but because a shelter that size, properly insulated, retains body heat effectively enough. Gregory Clone, the Oakland artist who founded the Homeless Homes Project and built more than 35 mobile tiny homes from entirely scavenged materials at $30 to $50 each, three-part pattern behind every other moment in history when effective improvised knowledge was displaced by institutional convenience. First, speed. A formalized shelter system can be managed, audited, reported on, and defended to a legislative committee. A distributed network of self-built structures cannot. Second, control. Institutional systems create institutional dependencies, funding streams, staffing hierarchies, political capital. Self-organized encampments create autonomy, and autonomous people are harder to count, harder to manage, and much harder to move when someone decides they need to go. Third, liability. The moment a government agency formally acknowledges that self-built shelters work, it inherits an obligation to make them safer and more legal. The easier bureaucratic path is to declare them violations and bulldoze them. The American Public Health Association formally noted in 2024 that encampment sweeps systematically destroy the shelter, belongings, medical supplies, and community relationships that residents have spent months or years building, with no measurable reduction in the total number of unsheltered people. The knowledge does not disappear when the shelter is bulldozed. It just has to start over in worse conditions, with less time before the next cold front arrives. Now here is what you can do with everything you have just learned. The most direct path is to support the people already deploying this engineering at scale. The Mad Housers in Atlanta accept material donations, plywood, roofing felt, basic hardware, and their model is built entirely around rapid deployment of proven shelter technology. These organizations are not running institutional programs. They are deploying verified physics in real communities. The people who built Dignity Village out of cardboard and blue tarps on frozen concrete were not demonstrating failure. They were demonstrating mastery of materials science, of thermal physics, of structural geometry, of the principle that understanding how something works is always more powerful than simply having access to an expensive version of it. The knowledge was never lost. It was buried under concrete and called a violation. We dig up the ingenuity that the system would prefer you walk past without examining. Tell us in the comments, what is the next topic you want us to investigate?